I was wondering if you could clear up an objection that I sometimes get when I'm speaking to people about like why I found Stoicism to be so useful. And it's usually an objection given to me by people that haven't, done that much research themselves, but maybe they are interested in like intuitive practices like breath work and meditation and yoga and things like that. And then I present, like the wisdom of the Stoics, and they will say, well, I don't believe that we should live a hyper rational life and we should be ruled by, the rational mind at all times. And, we need to leave some space for intuition. And I'm wondering, what is your thought about that objection?
I think the Stoics would say, yeah, but you have to, right, first of all, a couple of things. Like, first of all, I think the Stoics would basically say, yeah, but you need to make a decision about whether you trust your intuition or not. Like, and how do you decide whether you trust it? You have to use reason, right, to figure out, is your intuition, I don't know whether intuition is reliable or not. Some people's intuition's awful. Like, it's way off the mark. Like, so the Stoics would say, sure, you could incorporate and find a role for intuition, but ultimately you're going to have to use, the Stoics use divination, by the way. Like, but they would say, but you have to also use reason. They're not two mutually exclusive things. It's reason ultimately that becomes the arbiter of whether or not our intuitions are reliable. And all it means is we observe the consequences of following our intuition and we critically appraise it and decide, whether it's a good guide or not. Socrates followed his intuition. He had the daemonian, like his inner voice that he said would guide him. But he made a decision about whether it was usually reliable or not. Like he said, over the course of his life, he found it to be reliable. Like it was a good guide to life. If it always led him into problems and it told him to do contradictory things, then reason would tell him that it's not a good idea to follow it. So I think the Stoics would find this a strange objection because they'd go, but you use reason and intuition, right? Like, there's reason that tells us whether intuition is any good or not. As an aside to that, I guess as a therapist, what I would say is that, you can't just say that intuition is a good guide. You'd need to say some forms of intuition are good, other forms of intuition are bad. Like, sometimes intuition is reliable, sometimes it's unreliable. The intuition of someone who's clinically depressed, in my experience, is often a pretty bad guide to life. Maybe at some level it could be, but a lot of the intuitions that clinically depressed people have are depressed intuitions. Like the intuitions of someone who suffers from generalized anxiety disorder are usually that something catastrophic is about to happen. Like we're all going to die. Like those intuitions are usually wrong as well, right? Because they've got psychopathology, right? Maybe somewhere underneath that, there's other intuitions, I don't know, but certainly a lot of their intuitions are anxious intuitions or depressive intuitions. Why would that be? Because when we have anxiety or depression, we exhibit cognitive biases. So our brain goes into a different mode of functioning, and we become more susceptible to biased thinking. We engage in what we call threat monitoring in psychology. And I can't, there aren't many situations where I'd be working with a seriously depressed or anxious client. And I think, you know what you need to do, buddy? Just trust your intuition more. Like, I can't feel it. That, generally speaking, that's probably not going to be the best advice, because most depressed clients would say, well, my intuition tells me I should stay in bed all day and never go outside, like, and stuff like that. Yeah. I'm like, no, well, yeah, that's probably just going to make you worse, right? So I, as a therapist, I'd say, of course, and we need to take a step back and decide, is this good or bad intuition?